All Alabama Gardener on the differences between a worm box and a compost pile. I'm sliding this second frame off of my worm box to show you that there's no bottom in my worm box. Compost piles may have, they may be in tumblers or other kinds of things that would have a bottom in them. So why is it important that the worm box not have a bottom in it? And the answer is that in the wintertime, when it gets cold, the worms will actually return to the ground to keep warm. And they wouldn't be able to do that if they were in some sort of a tumbler or compost container. Now here we see a lot of material that's lying on the ground that is almost completely broken down by moisture and the worms. Now here's a clump of material that's pretty much decayed and in the process of being eaten by the worms. And here's some cardboard that's not as decayed, and it isn't ready yet for the worms to devour it. The point of all this is in the worm box, it's going to be moisture, microbes, and worms that will ultimately break your material down into worm castings. Whereas in a compost bin or a compost pile, it will be the microbes and heat and moisture to break your material down. Now I'm going to refill the worm box, and the fact that the material is going to get pretty thoroughly combined and mixed up is immaterial to the worms. It really won't matter. But in the case of a compost pile, turning and mixing the material is a beneficial step in the process. The worms would actually rather be left alone because they will ball up into a mass, and if you turn the pile, that's going to break that mass up. Another important point is that in the compost pile, your ratio of green material to dry or brown material is very, very important. Whereas in the worm box, we don't want too much green material because we don't want the worm box to heat up. Now notice that I'm going to reach over into my compost pile and add a few scoops of horse manure compost to my worm box because the horse manure is good food for the worms, and this small amount of manure will not cause my worm box to heat up. Now let's finish getting all that material back into the worm box. So here's the compost pile, and I am going to turn it or to mix it, and I will add some paper and material in there for worm food. And if the compost gets too hot, then the worms can get out and move to a cooler area, and then once the compost cools down, then the worms will return. Now you're going to see me spray the compost with a mixture of beer, Coca-Cola, and ammonium in 20 gallons of water. Well, it'll be in a hose-end sprayer. But I wouldn't spray my worms with that because the ammonium would probably kill them. The ammonium adds nitrogen to our compost pile, the Coke adds sugar, and the beer adds yeast, and microbes love all three of those.